Hi, I'm Bob, and welcome to Between the Sheets, where we look at Microsoft Excel and related technologies. You know time is money, but more accurately, there is a time value of money. A dollar you receive today is worth more than a dollar you'll receive tomorrow. And that's the concept of present value. What is the value today of payments you'll receive in the future? Excel has two functions to figure this out: present value and net present value. So let's take a look and see how it works. I'll start off with a straightforward present value calculation because that's more simple. On this sheet, we're evaluating an investment that will generate $200 every month for 10 years. We expect an interest rate of 3% a year, and at the end of those 10 years, sadly, the income stream stops, so the future value is zero. What we want to know is what should we expect to pay for this today so we get that sweet, sweet income stream later. That's our PV. First, let's look at the function syntax. The syntax is equals PV, and then we have three required arguments. The first argument is the interest rate. It's typically the yearly rate. The second argument is the number of periods, which is usually the number of months or the number of quarters. The third argument is what is the payment amount. This needs to be the same amount in every period, every month or every quarter. You might say to yourself, but well, wait a minute, what if I anticipate different amounts each period? That's where we use the net present value function, which I'm going to show you later. I'm going to show you that next. Now you notice there are two optional arguments here. Future value, the FV, that is what will be the future value when the payments have run their course. By default, it's zero. And the type is whether the payment happens at the beginning or the end of the period. By default, which is what usually happens, is it's at the beginning. So I'm going to go here into B9. I'm going to say equals PV and open the parenthesis. You can see there's the syntax helper. So the first argument, as we said, is the interest rate. Now, that's the yearly interest rate, but we're dealing with monthly payments, so we have to convert that yearly rate to a monthly rate, which means dividing by 12, comma. So next argument is the number of periods. So the number of years is 10 years, so there's 12 months in a year, so we convert that from years to months by multiplying by 12, comma. So the next argument is the payment. We see it's right there. That's the 200, comma, and future value is 0. So I'm going to click that. And I'm going to Control Enter, hold down Control key and press Enter. And we can see it's just shy of 21,000. Now let me just open this up again for a moment. I'm going to double click that. If I take that optional B7, that 0, and I remove it and enter it, you notice it's the same thing. The result hasn't changed because, as we said, by default, that value is 0. And you notice the number is negative. And it's negative because this is a cash outflow. So if you don't like that it's a negative number and you want to make it look positive, a couple of things you could do. Let me just double click that. Is I could put a minus sign before that monthly payment. So we got that. Or if you don't like that, because it's technically not correct, what I could do is remove that minus sign and wrap the entire thing in an absolute value function. ABS is absolute value, not anti-lock braking, and that gives us the same result. Anyway, this means that if you get the opportunity to pay any less than this amount when the rate you would expect to earn is 3%, this is a good deal. As the rate increases, the present value decreases, and vice versa. So, for example, if I take this, that 3%, and I make that 4%, you notice that present value decreases a little bit. What if you anticipate cash flows that are uneven? This might happen if you're investing in a product or service that has a life cycle. Think of a bell curve. It takes time to build momentum and get going, and then it later decreases in usefulness or there's increased competition. This is where we use net present value. Net present value is the difference between the present value of an investment's cost and the present value of the revenue we expect to get. The regular PV function can't do this, but the NPV function lets you use uneven cash flows. Also, the NPV function doesn't care if payments happen at the beginning or the end of the periods. Here's an example of two possibilities to compare. The first option has a lower initial cost than the second option, and it has smaller cash flows than the second option. So we want to find out, well, which is better? Do we want to pay less and get less, or do we want to pay more and get more? So let's look at the syntax. This is a little easier than a regular present value. Simply say equals NPV, and then we put in what's the interest rate, and then what's the cash flows. The first one, the second one, the third one, and so on. Typically, the first cash flow is going to be negative because that's the cost. Remember, this is cash flow. It's not necessarily income. Now, in these two examples, we're looking at yearly cash flows, so there's no need to convert the yearly interest rate to monthly. So let's start down there in B12. We're going to say equals NPV, open the parenthesis, there's our syntax helper. So I'm going to say, okay, there's that first argument is 3%, comma. So the first cash flow is that payment, so that's that negative 50,000. Now, we don't have to cherry pick each individual one because after putting in that first initial negative number, put in a comma, we could just drag down the rest of them like that. Now I'll press Control Enter, and we can see that net present value is just shy of 8,200. Now, I could go and get the autofill and drag that to the right, but I'm not going to do that because I want to show you this one more time so you have another example. So we're going to say equals NPV, open the parenthesis, there's the interest rate, comma, there's that first negative cash flow, comma, drag down the rest of those cash flows and Control Enter, or if you're on the Mac, Command Enter. And we see what that net present value is. So the result of this is pretty clear. The first option, which costs less and returns less, is a much better value than the option that costs more and returns more. PV or NPV might sound difficult or scary, but you see they really aren't complicated, and they can be pretty useful. So until next time, my name is Bob, and this has been Between the Sheets.